Good morning, family. This is Ron. It is Sunday morning, a little after 11 a.m. And let's get started today. We will see first if we have any questions uh, about anything you may have noticed, anything else you want to discuss about the storm or the anything on the tube that you've seen interesting. I do know that on this day in 1967 was the day that Thurgood Marshall was sworn into office. As just kind of an FYI, if you ever find yourself on Jeopardy, I suppose. But anyway, if there's nothing else to grab our attention, on yesterday we talked about the look. We took a closer look at the creation story, and we looked at it even from the perspective of Revelations. And what we were trying to do anyway is see that the unity, the oneness of the heavens and the earth in our minds and through our religious upbringing, we have been shown or taught that those are two separate entities. And not only are they separate, we have grown to believe that they are separate from us and not a part of the vastness of the universe. And we have never before seen ourselves as being that universe. And all of this is talking about who we are, not that where we live so much, but who we actually are. So we went into that a little bit yesterday, and we hopefully had a enlightening discussion. And if not, hopefully you guys can ask some questions about that as we move today. Looking at that today, we want to continue that discussion, looking at it from the perspective of looking at the light and the darkness, which seem to be part of the dominating portion of the creation story. When you start to look at it, what exactly is that? What is known, what is unknown, and what does all of that mean? So want to look at that today, and I'll be honest with you, I don't feel the confidence that I sort of did yesterday. At least I felt better about it because what I've seen in sort of researching light and darkness is there are various types of lights and degrees of darkness. And so when you look at that and look at how it is introduced into scripture, for example, there was a type of darkness that Jesus talked about in Matthew. I have it written somewhere. I can't find it right now. But what it is talking about, it is a vast darkness or extreme darkness that does not show any light at all. And that kind of caught me off guard. It's talking about not being able to see the Creator. And so I kind of looked at those things and it got me a little confused, I guess. So I want to try to confine this to what is taking place in the creation story, and maybe at another time, because it intrigued me enough to want to go back and look at those. But today would not be the day to do so. Okay. So without further ado, I'm going to look at this. And again, as always, appreciate your help, your questions, and your answers as we unfold this. And I'm going to just read the first couple verses of Genesis, and I'll probably start off with a question and see where we go here. So, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the water. and God said, let there be light. Okay, I'm going to read verse 4. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. So here we are, we see this taking place here, and we're all familiar with this, but what is this really saying?
Excuse me.
What is this really saying here? And, any thoughts or questions on what you see here, or what does it bring to your mind?
Ron, this is for Mel. You're fading in and out. Are you moving about or turning around?
Hello, Ron?
I'm seated. You guys, can you hear me now? Is this better?
Yeah, you're clear now. It sounds like you're turning your voice away from your microphone or your phone. It was just fading in and out.
Okay, I'm sorry.
But you're strong right now. Thank you.
Okay,
Hey, Ron,
thank you. I appreciate you pointing that out. Yes, sir.
I want you to read that again, and then I would like to read that from a different translation, okay?
Yes, sir. Okay, I'm in Genesis chapter 1. I'm going to read those first 4 verses, okay? Okay. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the waters. And then God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. That's the first 4 verses of chapter 1 of Genesis.
Okay. I want to read it from Bender's translation, the translation of that's done by someone who's well versed in Hebrew.
Okay.
In the summit, Elohim shaped the skies and the earth and the land. And the land had existed in confusion and was unfilled, and darkness was upon the face of the deep water. And the wind of Elohim was fluttering upon the face of the waters. And Elohim said, light will exist, and light existed. And Elohim saw the light, given that it was functional. And Elohim made a separation between the light and the darkness. And Elohim called out the light day, and to the darkness he called out night, and evening existed, and morning existed, a day unit.
Okay. Well, to start this off, and that is a different, yeah, I like that. The thing that this is describing is we're not looking at just the earth as we once thought. This is talking about, and you got to see this spiritually. This is not like looking through a telescope looking at the earth. This is a spiritual connection here between what is light and what is darkness, what is illuminated and what is not. And one writer, Douglas Clark, said something that I really liked, and I can't really explain it, but he talks about the darkness being in the Spirit of God, the darkness over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the waters. What he's saying is that was an intimacy, a dance, if you will, as kind of what we were talking about yesterday between these two entities, these two energies. And it is through this unity that light comes forth. If this does not occur, then the let there be light never illuminates. Can anybody speak to that? Do you see something different there, or maybe even explain that a little further?
I have a question. I'm sorry.
I should give ready to say I see something there, but go ahead with your question.
So are we the Elohim that did this separation or said, let there be light?
We became that after all of this. We don't come into existence until later.
Okay.
Preparation is being made for us to be brought into it. Makes sense? But I saw something here. When you're talking about the hovering, what I see here is that the skies and the land, the skies and the consciousness shaped, and the land had existed in confusion, and was unfilled, and darkness was upon the face of the deep water. So it speaks to more to bringing order to confusion. It talks about light and darkness, then how confused and unfilled the skies and the consciousness were. I mean, the land was unfilled. The consciousness was existing in confusion, which means that there was a type in the beginning that existed without the understanding of what light is or who Elohim is. And it almost speaks to, well, not almost, it brings me to an understanding that the type of man, the Cro-Magnon, are those who no longer exist, that brought confusion to the land. And the reason it was necessary to bring things back to order is because that entity had lost its way, and a different type of man, a different type of Adam was brought into the earth. My question becomes this: at this juncture, if this other type was in the earth, then was it created in the image of Elohim, or was this entity that we are now the only one that was created in that image? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I want to back you up though. I see the chaos. I see the confusion. That's the dark. In one episode or something I read is almost saying it was sort of almost a violent type of turmoil or can someone please mute your phone, please? But what are you calling the consciousness? That's the Spirit of God. You're saying the consciousness or what brings order to the confusion, the moving of on the surface of the water. Was that the Spirit of God that does that?
Yes.
Say that part for me.
What I'm saying is that if we look at this closely, we see that the confusion was not in the skies or the heavens. It was in the land, which speaks to the consciousness of this realm.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that's where the confusion was. And when in the spirit, the wind, the spirit of Elohim floated upon the face of the deep. Wait, what does that mean? Are they equating confusion with darkness? And that darkness that was on the face of the deep, meaning that that darkness covered the waters out of which life was brought, and what brought it out was the the fact that the spirit of Elohim was floating over it, and as Klotz talked about, there was an intimacy between the darkness and the. Would you mute your phone, please? There was an intimacy between the darkness and the water, and out of that out of that intimacy that took place, Elohim spoke in the midst of that darkness, in the midst of that intimacy, and said, light will exist. Now, I do not believe that it was speaking to light, luminous light. I do believe it was speaking to order, because it speaks to light existing, bringing order to the confusion. And then when the confusion, I'm sorry, when the order was seen, then Elohim said, this is functional. Now, if you take that functionality and go to the garden, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, it's talking about the tree of functionality and dysfunctionality. Excuse me. So functionality existed in the beginning, and it was brought from the confusion that had covered the deep. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm trying to pull all that together. Yeah.
So
I have a
let me see.
question. So if the confusion was over the land or over the deep, over the water?
Over the
I
water.
thought you said it was over the land. Can you explain that again?
Yes, sure. It says that the land existed in confusion, which means the consciousness existed in confusion. And then it says that darkness was upon the face of the deep water, and the wind of Elohim was fluttering upon the face of the waters. So, what I'm saying is that it's talking about the confusion that existed over the nature of man, because if water is a physical representation of spirit, then that means that the confusion was in the spirit of that which existed in the earth. And because of that confusion, there was a need to bring order. And the intimacy of Elohim with that darkness or that confusion that covered the water is what brought into existence the light. And that light that existed wasn't more of an understanding than it was the physical darkness that we see or that we talk about. Does that make sense, Audrey?
Yeah. I guess I'm still confused about so the darkness was not confusion?
The darkness was confusion.
Okay, so there was confusion over the land and the water. Okay.
Yes, the consciousness. Let me see if I can make it clearer. The consciousness of man was in a state of confusion. He had no inkling as to his spiritual nature. That's the waters. So the confusion not only was not only in the earth consciousness of the man, but it was also a confusion in his spiritual consciousness. So he had no idea who he was or what it was, and as a result of that, then there was a need for that for the waters rather, and the Spirit of God to be intimate and bring into existence light, which means that confusion was brought to a state of order.
Okay, I get it now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? because I know that this can be awfully confusing because of how we have been indoctrinated or taught for so many years, something totally different than what we are talking about. So if we have to stay at this point for the rest of our time together, then so be it. But once we understand this, I do believe it will give us a greater understanding of where we are in terms of our existence in this earth right now. Okay?
Sage, this is Brunel. I'm still a little confused. It begs me to ask the question, was there a quote man?
I can't understand you, dear. Everyone make sure your phone. Okay. Well,
Okay. With the confusion that we talked about in the conscience,
yeah,
was
me too. Okay, you must be outside because the interference
no,
stopped.
I'm not outside. I'm
Okay.
inside.
Okay.
So does that mean that another form of man had pre-existed?
Let me see if I can do it in story form, okay?
Okay.
And give you an example. A story. There was in existence in the earth was the Cro-Magnon man, which is a different type than we are.
Okay.
And this Cro-Magnon man had no clue as to who it was in terms of spirituality, and didn't even seek to find out.
Okay.
And because of that, not only was he mentally confused, I mean, consciousness was confused as to his purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Since he had no clue as to who it was and how it got him, his spiritual nature was also in a state of flux or confusion. And that when he talks about covering the waters represent the spirit of that Cro-Magnon man. Got me so far?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So now what happens is there is an intimacy between the light of between Elohim, which is light, and the confusion that existed both spiritually and mentally with this man, or emotionally with this man. So as a result of that intimacy, light was called into existence, which means that balance, which made our order, was called into existence. And the light was separated from that confusion, which gave opportunity for the next type of man that was to be created to bring itself to a place of searching for who its existence, who it is, and why it exists. With me so far.
Yes, I am.
All right. Are you with me?
I am.
Okay. Now, we stop right there at this place of the darkness. The light represents functionality. Darkness represents dysfunctionality. The light represents rightness, and represents unright. It's a different type of light and darkness.
Pastor,
Yes.
I'm so distracted and having problems hearing everything you're saying because someone's phone's not muted.
Okay. Let me say this then. I'll ask you, everyone, please mute your phone while someone else is speaking. Okay? Okay. Is that clear about me? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So what I'm saying is that please mute your phones.
Pastor, I have a question. Can I go ahead and mute all and then unmute you so you can talk? And then as
Say
each
again?
person, I have the ability to mute all.
Okay. Okay.
Till I do
Yes.
that, then unmute anybody who,
Yes. You
Okay.
all
Pastors,
be good right now, okay?
okay. I didn't mute
Now,
everything, but okay.
where we are with the understanding of the confusion and the light, what we are seeing is the same thing that we were shown in the garden. The words that were used to translate knowledge of good and evil and the knowledge and the tree of life, those words in translation lost their true meaning. The tree of life should have been translated as the tree of functionality, the knowledge of functionality. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil should have been translated as dysfunctional. If we see the translations here as functional and dysfunctional in the garden, this is the same principle that's applied in the midst of this order being put into place. The same words are there. The functionality is the light. Dysfunctionality is the confusion. And when the light of order or the functionality of light was intermingled with that dysfunctionality, what happened? Light existed, which means functionality existed. And at that point, the Creator separated dysfunctionality from functionality. That's the same thing that happened in the garden. And what I am saying is this. Prior to this, the advent of this separation of light and darkness, function and functionality, there had been a different type of man in the earth, because it doesn't speak to the total creation. It speaks to the fulfillment of something that already exists. It speaks to bringing order to something that has lowered itself into a place of confusion. So there had to be something in existence prior to this type being brought into existence. Does that make sense? And you can unmute it, Vermeil.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So everyone is unmuted now, right?
Yes, everyone is. Except
Okay.
for those who choose to be muted.
Okay. Now my question, you guys, is that clearer, or do you have more questions about it? Or is that something a question that you don't know how to form? Either of those, please respond.
Hey, Red, this is tough. What caused all this confusion and why it was on the land?
Again, this is not land like outside your house. This is
Okay. What consciousness?
Yes. What caused it, I have no idea other than a supposition. And my supposition is that the type of man, and I don't know what else to call it, that entity that existed prior to this happening had no clue as to who it was and made no efforts to find out its connection with the Creator. It is known through anthropology, through science, it is known that there was a type of man, there were type of men that existed prior to us. The bones that has been discovered shows that we are a different type of man than what then existed prior to the existence that we enjoy now. Does that make sense, Charles? And I don't mind anyone helping me to explain this.
Yes, I get it a little bit.
Okay, let me put it this way. Here we are. We're going to build this house, right? And we have no idea what a hammer is. So we start trying to build a house and put it together with sticks. We are confused about the difference between a hammer and a stick or the hammer and a rock. Here, someone comes along, and when they come, they see the confusion, and they cannot make us see with a clearer vision what a hammer is and what it does.
Okay.
That means that we are confused, right?
Yes, I got it.
Okay. So all of that dies out, and when it dies out, it does it. And when something else is brought into existence, there is a different type of preparation made, and the preparation that's made is the foundation of functionality and dysfunctionality. The confusion that we had is still there, but we are created with the ability to recognize the difference between the two. And the reason now that we are able to do that is because we have the same essence in us that the one who created us has. And that did not exist prior to, and that's the reason the confusion came into being without the opportunity of having the light understanding so we could bring order to it. Does that make sense? Or am I just digging a deeper hole?
Let me ask a question. Well, let's first, before I go another place, make sure everybody understands what you're saying. Ask if you have any questions. And I'm gonna take it somewhere else, I think.
But it doesn't make sense.
It does. It makes sense. My question is something else I read. The writer didn't discuss past, present, and future. His discussion involved past, future, and present. Whereas something happens to you in your past, it may have been in childhood, it may have been years ago, and you see it, and depending on whether or not you dismiss it or you see a value in it or you hold on to it for whatever reason, it helps you with something later in your future, and it helps to not only brings clarity to you, it helps you in that present time, that present state. And the only reason I'm bringing this up, you brought up the consciousness and the Cro-Magnon man, who has is there some place now that brings us value as we unravel this, that understanding, that person, a type of man that existed for whatever reason? Is there something that you may see there that bring us value today? Does that make his existence bring any reasoning or understanding to help us see something different right now? I hope you can understand what I'm saying. because we've read about the Cro-Magnon man and the Neanderthal and whatever else that was out there, and without any type of really understanding of their existence. Do you see anything there in the spiritualness as we try to unravel this?
What do you mean when you say, do I see anything in the spiritual as we try to unravel this?
Well, do you see anything of value there that says that this had to happen to man, or this man had to exist so that we could see that, or that we could become this? Or was there? Do you see any type of reasoning for his existence that we may not have seen some time ago, or maybe even that science doesn't understand?
I got you. I don't know whether or not it was a necessity to bring the type of entity or man into existence prior to bringing us into existence. I don't know that was true. However, suppose for a moment that the Cro-Magnon, the Neanderthal, all of them, and their existence were no different than what we are now. And there was no one to stand in the gap. There was no one like us searching. Everyone was caught up in religion and whatever they were doing in their everyday life, whether it was killing a dinosaur or whatever. That's all they was caught up in, what they saw with their eyes, and never saw anything with their eye. That in itself would have brought about confusion. And because of their 100% attention being focused on their existence physically, with no desire for anything spiritual, or at the very least, making it up as they go, like we do now. Religion without someone in the gap is no different than the darkness, than the confusion that covers covers the consciousness of the earth. And if that consciousness of the earth continues, what did the Mayans talk about? 2012, the earth would end unless there was somebody to stand in the gap. Remember that?
Yes.
So we are no different in our existence than was the previous type of man, be it the Neanderthal or whomever. We are no different. The only thing that makes a difference is that the groundwork was laid for this confusion to be tempered by the light, by the order that was brought into existence prior to the physical man being introduced to its home, this earth, this physical earth. And though we see the light in this physical form, it is not the light of light. It is not the light of life. The light of life is the order that drives us to understand the spiritual nature of our being. And we are brought into this earth with the understanding that we are more than our bodies. We are brought into this earth with that understanding. But if we do not take time to understand what that means, we end up with the same mentality, the same confusion as the pre-existent man, existent man. What am I saying? When we talk about my body, no one takes the time to stop and ask, if it's my body, who is the mind? We just move on without raising those types of questions because we are so caught up in creating our own light, which is religion, and see no darkness at all other than the darkness of those who do not believe like we believe, because we are right. And never asking the question, are we really right? Never asking the question about who does this body belong to. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yes,
I
I
do.
hear you.
Yeah.
I have a question.
So
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, the only thing that separates us from the entity before us, would it be not the bodily form?
No. The only
No?
thing, no, ma'am. The bodily form of the Neanderthal was physical. The thing that separates us is the spiritual desire to know who we are. Let me put it this way. We were no different than the Neanderthal when we were sitting in those pews, gobbling up everything we were taught without any understanding whatsoever. We were receiving, and we were accepting everything that was given to us about spirituality from a group of people who have never known what spirituality is. And we were not able to see who we are until we began to ask questions and separate ourselves from the principles that we had been taught all our lives, not from the people, but from the principles that we had been taught all our lives. And when we separated ourselves from those principles, the confusion that we had been taught did not leave us. That space of separation, because it didn't make sense, gave opportunity for the light to shine forth, for our souls to begin to speak and raise questions. And when that happened, what happened at that point is we started to see with our eye, and we started talking about the things that came to us that now make sense. So it has nothing to do with the body. It has everything to do with the difference between mind and soul. Does that make sense, Evan? Everybody else?
Yes.
Huh?
Yes,
Okay.
it does. Yes, sir.
Pastor,
Yes.
I have a kind of a supposition that I think supports what you're saying, if I'm understanding it, okay? One of the things I read that talked about the light in the beginning, that it had multiple meanings. And one of those multiple meanings talked about it introducing the intellect, the intelligence of man, showing of how to be intelligent. So could it be that this light having multiple purposes, the only thing that happened really with most mankind is he pulled the intellect out, the Neanderthal man pulled the intellect out without pulling out anything else. So it does not help him spiritual, but it does give him
Ron, I can't background noise. Premier, please mute everyone except Ron. Put your phone, Ron.
Ron,
Okay.
something?
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, this makes no sense. We've asked you 1,000 times. Please mute your phone. Disrespectful to everyone else on the line. Mute your phone, please. Where's the noise coming from?
Somebody outside. Okay. Richard is muted. Ron's muted.
Okay, Vermeil, Vermeil, unmute you.
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm trying to figure out where the noise is coming, the
I
background
think
noise.
they just muted their phone because there were only 3 people muted prior to that.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead,
Um,
Ron. Ron?
I think it's hard to unmute yourself if you've called in. So Vermel will have to unmute him.
Okay.
Unmute Ron, please. Thank you, Denise.
Mute.
Sure.
Unmute, remove.
Ron?
I'm having Janice. How do I unmute him?
Let me take a look. Hold on. I'll log in on the computer.
Okay.
This is Barbara. May I say something while we're
Absolutely.
working on that issue? Another way that I see this is if you look at a winemaker only sees the grapes, the physical grapes. And the winemaker is not a winemaker if all it sees are the physical grapes. So the winemaker is only a gardener. It only sees, okay, I've grown these grapes. They taste good. The winemaker doesn't get the fullness, the entirety of what can happen unless he or she begins to press on those grapes and expel the flavor, the nutrients, the oil, what do grapes express? Anyway, the essence of that grape is more than what you physically see. And if you think about it, winemakers are able to express different things from the grapes they grow. They begin to learn what nutrients will grow grapes which yield better white wines. They begin to learn what nutrients best support grapes that grow more delectable red wines, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like the physical and the spiritual. We've got to know both. The grape represents the physical, but what's pressed from that grape, the essence of that grape, represents the spiritual. Until we know the spiritual as well, we go through, as you say, life. My words, your words were, chaos. My words is seeing things my way and my way only. We go through life looking at things from one perspective, which is our own physical perspective. And when you got hundreds of thousands of people looking at things from their own physical perspective, each of which may be different, that's part of the confusion, that's part of the chaos. But once we take that step in knowing and understanding, there's another aspect to the physical, which is the spiritual, and understanding that spiritual essence is more than this physical grape. That the essence of the grape is much more than just the grape itself. So the essence of the spiritual part of me is much more than the physical part of me. As I understand that and as I embrace that, then I am able to create. And creation is simply separating. It's not separating something from nothing. It is separating what you do have, being distinct and saying this and that, light and dark, good and evil, etc. It gives us that ability. And so knowing physical and spiritual gives me the opportunity and the ability to begin to be distinctful terms of the decisions I make. I can then choose to come from the spiritual essence rather than just the physical essence, which was all I knew before. But the spiritual enlarges my view, enlarges my consciousness, enlarges who I am, and tells me that I'm more than the physical body that you see, that the spiritual part of me is so much larger. I don't know if that helps or not, but that's part of what I see.
I see what you're saying. I really do. Suppose for a moment that what we call separation is actually gradation. Suppose there is between functionality and dysfunctionality a gradation as opposed to a separation. That as you move to embracing who you are spiritually, you don't separate from the physical, but there's a gradation between the physical and the spiritual, which means that they are never disconnected, but we are unaware of the gradation between the two. Does that make sense?
I like that, because what we're saying is that there is, when we decide that, then there is no good or evil per se.
Right.
But I think what confuses us is when we read where it says God separated, and I'm wondering if there's not another word which is a deeper root than what we've been shown here. But I understand exactly what you say. There are gradations, and so one is not worse than the one is not bad in and of itself.
One defines the other.
Exactly.
One defines the other.
What'd you say, Ron?
One defines the other. You're absolutely right. One is not only no better than the other. One defines the other. One cannot exist on its own. So even whether you look at it, whether it's heaven and earth, whether you look at it as light and darkness, whether you look at it as good and evil, one defines the other, and one does not exist by in and of its own.
Now,
there has to be a balance there.
absolutely. Now, this is what I'm seeing. The gradation is there, right? And the balance does not come to the spiritual because it's already balanced. The balance comes as a result of the spiritual making you aware of who you are, which means that when we bring balance to the physical world, we have created something. And the balance to the physical world is when the physical world embraces and abides by the principles of the essence of spirituality. Does that make sense?
Completely. It does, and that is the balance. And the word that comes to mind is awareness. You're always seeking a place of awareness, and that is the creation. That is what allows you to create, and that is also the intimacy.
So
that, yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Nothing. I'm just going to say the mingling of those two concepts is the intimacy, and that is what moves us from one place of awareness to the next. I'm
But it
simplifying.
is also that the creation part of it is bigger than just one or the other.
Absolutely. What it is,
Yes.
what I see the creation part of it is They become one entity, meaning that the principles of of the spiritual now become the principle of the physical as well. And and the only place where that takes place is with the created man, the Adam. Does that make sense?
The human.
You're human.
That's the importance of recognizing that you are human. That's the importance of walking away from the Neanderthal. The Neanderthal is the man. What I was trying to say when we were having the confusion with the noise, that light has different meanings and different things that you can pull out of it. And one of the things that you can pull out of it is intellect. And that's all man has found valuable in that light. He is aware of it, but he has pulled out the intellect. And the intellect does not allow him to create. The intellect doesn't even allow him to be human.
But Ron, he does not have light to pull his intellect out of. Why? Because if it was the light of Elohim, right?
Mm-hmm.
What he will pull out of it is wisdom. So he has created his own source of light, and creating its own source of light. You can call it Elohim, you can call it God, you can call it Allah, you can call it Allah, you call it anything you want. However, if it's not the one with the principles of Creator, then you have created your source of light, and that is the reason you pull intellect out of it and call it godly. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's what the church has done. That's what the church has done. It has pulled light, what it calls light, out of the light that it created. What light is it that the church created? If you look at the origin of the church being Catholicism and trace it back, you will find that the origin of the theories of Catholicism starts with the Greek philosophers who did not understand the Cushite philosophies of life. And they became intellectual as opposed to understanding the wisdom of them. And the other thing is this: there are no theories in the scriptures at all, be it the Quran, the Bible, the Hindu holy book. There are no theories. They are realities. They are theories when you don't understand them. They are realities when you seek to know who you are and how you fit into the spiritual world. Does that make sense?
Yes.
See, and let me ask this question: are we understanding the difference between theory and spirit and reality? I'm not just talking about those who are facilitators. I'm talking to everyone on this line. Do you understand what I'm saying when I say the difference between theory and spirituality? If you do, say yes. If you don't, say no.
Yes.
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 Okay.
Yeah.
And when we, hold 1 second.
So can I ask a quick question? Hello?
Yeah.
So the difference between theory and reality. Reality is the experience. Theory is the intellect.
Yes.
Okay.
And
Yeah, I got it.
It's like when we talk about the storms, right? If you say, I'm going to check this theory out and see if we can do this for real, it doesn't happen. But when you do it because you know it's real, it happens. You don't test spirituality. Intellect does that. Spirituality knows it exists, knows it's real, and knows what it can do, and it does it. Does that make sense, Ms. Audrey?
Got it.
Okay. Now,
Thank you.
Pastor.
huh?
This is Kathy. Good morning, everyone. I have a question for you. All of what we're discussing today is leading me to think of another scripture. And I've heard what you all have said about the prehistoric man. And I heard what you said about he lived, and I'm going to paraphrase what you said. He was living from his intellect, using his eyes, and so therefore his vision was, quote unquote, never singular. And I've heard what you all have said this morning about light and darkness. And I think I'm digesting it, but I want to interject the scripture to see if I have more clarity to it, because I've never understood the scripture, but I think you're explaining it today, and I want to be sure. I am in Luke, the 11th chapter, and I'm reading after it talks about no man in the 33rd verse. When a man lights a candle, he doesn't put it in a secret place or he doesn't hide it. But when you look at 34 and 35, it says the light of the body is the eye. Therefore, when thine eye is single, the whole body is full of light. But when thy eye is, and it says evil, but I'm going to say unripe, the whole body is also full of darkness, ignorance, confusion, or whatever word we want to term that. So then it says, take heed, therefore, that the light which is in thee is not darkness. So based on everything that you said, the example of the prehistoric man living from his eyes and his intellect, but now when we talk about take heed that your light is not dark, is not darkness, what I'm thinking about, we talked about the spark of divine is in every man. And every man has the potential to live singularly, living from the eye, the enlightenment of the third eye. When he does not know to do that, I see this as a summer day. It's beautiful, the light is shining, the storm clouds roll in. But if you look behind those dark, dark clouds, you can still see the light trying to shine through. So I see in us, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm seeing that internally that light is in us. And until we go on this journey of self-discovery, seeking out who we are, it's like the storm clouds covering it. And we can call it intellect, we can call it confusion, we can term it ignorance, we can call it many things, ignorance of self. But I see it as being that way until we wake up and go onto this journey of enlightenment to discover who we are. Then we begin to live singularly. And that's what separates, well, that's what is the word I won't separate. I'm not sure I want to use that word, but that is the difference between the Cro-Magnon man, the Neanderthal, prehistoric man, period, as opposed to the man who is seeking truth in who he is. That's what separates us now. Am I seeing that right, or am I looking at the scripture all wrong? Because I've always had questions about, take heed, therefore, that the light which is in thee be not darkness. And I think y'all are saying this today. I think you're explaining it. And I hope I added some clarity to it too. But talk to me about that particular scripture in Luke 11, please. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Take heed that your light is not darkness. Take heed that your light is not confusion. In other words, the thing that you call light, make sure that it's not confusion. Make sure that it's not religion. Make sure it's not intellect. Make sure that the light in you is spiritual. It is enlightening, as opposed to being
singular.
Huh?
Singular, living from my eye.
Yeah, singular means that is not chaotic. There's nothing confusing about it. Why? Because we see the principles for what they are. Does that make sense? Before I continue.
It does.
Okay. Now, when I speak now of the Cro-Magnon man, I'm speaking of the principle, okay, the concept, all right? Because we are in the same state that the Neanderthal Cro-Magnon was in. If the sun is shining and the cloud covers the sun, that's the spark of life and light is in every man. However, if that man does not see the importance of searching for the light behind that cloud, if that man doesn't look for that light, only sees what it wants in the earth, and I think as Barbara said earlier, want what you want for you, and that's it. Proper paraphrasing what she said, but I think that's pretty much what she said. If that is the case, then that spark does you no good. And the day comes eventually when the light of the Creator is no longer with you. The only light that's with you is the only light rather that you have connections to is the light that you created, because you have rejected the light of the Creator for so long until you have become comfortable with your selfishness, with your ignorance, with your intellectual dominance, with all of these dominance, with all these other things that you've become comfortable with them, and you're totally uncomfortable with anyone who's able to talk to you about that light that's behind that dark cloud. Can you see that? Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So if you don't see that light behind that dark cloud and you got caught up in your selfish ways, then there has to be someone who is brought into the consciousness of the earth who will extrapolate on your behalf an understanding of what's spiritual and what's not, for the purpose of teaching you how to move beyond your religious, selfish ways and seek the wisdom of who you were created to be in this earth. The spark is there, but the spark is no different than you having a PIN number for your ATM card and not using it because someone told you to use it and you think that they're too ignorant to know anything. And they really are telling you the truth when they give you that number, but you starve to death because you don't use it. You rob somebody because you don't use it. You work yourself to death because you don't use it. You're too selfish and blind to see the truth of it. That's how that spark is. So what happens? You get to a place where you just don't tell them anymore about the PIN code. They've heard it enough, but they've rejected totally. And until they get to a place where they desire to understand what you're telling them and raise the questions, they will never change. It doesn't stop you from seeking understanding of the spiritual. Because the day comes when you realize that we are functioning as spiritual beings. We're not testing spiritual theories. We are functioning as spiritual beings. We're not caught up in religion because it's popular. We are caught up in spirituality because it's real. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Good morning, Pastor. Everyone, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, my question is, can we see this from the conception of a child or related to childbirth? There's so much that has been said, and I'm just trying to conceptually see it in a way that we can look at what appears to be confusion, but look at it spiritually in the birth of a child. I think that there's so much that's in that from the womb egg or from the spiritual realm that sometimes to see the manifestation of a child, but all what goes through that process, which is not theory, but is spirituality. So I think as we, begin to, again, appreciate this dialogue, I guess my question is, can we see it from the conception of a child in terms of looking at confusion, looking at the darkness, and looking at the light, looking at the transformation, and it having some continuity or some substance where it's all the one. I think that's again the question I'm at, because it just my mind is just having me to reflect on what all's been said. But I think just having that point or that question asked, can anyone see it from that perspective? I'm done.
I want to ask you, George.
Yeah.
To show us what you see from that perspective, because you see something.
Okay, so as we talk about the Neanderthals, we talk about, when that died out and we came into the Homo sapiens sapien, which talks about, it ruling the planet Earth. And it related to the hunter and the gatherers. And I'm really just trying to bring it up to the point where spirituality comes into existence, where we talk about the cave drawings, we talk about, the early man worshiping a creation goddess who gave birth to all life. So when we talk about the womb, we talk about the principles of masculine and feminine energy. We talk about the eternal waters of the Nun, and looking at it from both the spirituality and from the science in terms of the Nun, Ptah, and Atum. There's the creative intelligences, Pastor, and everyone. And I'm trying to see that all of that confusion, I now see it in a way spiritually, that I can see how the birth of a child, its senses, its intelligences, that whole characteristics of a soul and a spirit manifesting, where it makes it sense to me to see how it might have been confusion and chaos, but how now it's manifested into the reality of who I am. And so I'm seeing it, but to be able to conceptually look at it, not from a theory, but from a birth reality. When a child is born, when does it come to that point where it becomes a male, female? So I think there's a lot of science that sometimes has helped me to be able to understand it from the atom or from the atomic consciousness, but it all manifesting from the reality that we can see it spiritually now, versus looking at it from a theory perspective. Again, somebody help me if you can, but I just think the birth of a child has so much to do with what we're talking about in terms of creation and looking at it from that spiritual perspective versus us just trying to look at it from a physical perspective.
Okay.
So that's how I'm done.
Someone else going to say something?
Yeah, this is Barbara. I want to add another layer to what you just said. Yeah, what you brought into existence is a child. But that child also has to understand what physicality is and what spirituality is. So yeah, I can see what you're saying as you move through that whole birth process. But in addition to that, that child has to come into the knowing and the awareness that there is physical and spiritual as well, in order for it to continue to create itself as a spiritual being. So it's got to know both.
And Barbara,
Yeah.
and I appreciate you're responding, because all of us go through experiences of life. And I'll just use an example of reality for me. With my granddaughter, who's basically 1 year old, there's the spirituality in terms of what the scriptures say, the spirit bear witness without spirit that we're the children of God. But in my granddaughter's eyes and her senses and the characteristics of her soul, there's that beginning of communication through eye contact, touch, smell, hear, see, sound. And I really believe that spirit is connecting in a way that she's developing her physical, senses. But as you say, there's a spiritual component, or there's a spiritual side of it that I think I can resonate. It resonates with me in the spirit, and I believe her spirit, is connecting in a way that sometimes we may not see it with our eyes totally, but with our spiritual eye. So I know that it both, it resonates with me what you're saying, Barbara, and I can appreciate it. And I think that there's things that we are learning from our offspring or from our children that's helping us to appreciate how do we share the spirit with them. Does that resonates a little bit what you're saying? But I see the understanding of it, Barbara. I really.
Yeah. You are her father is the God to her. You are the God to her. And when you resonate from a spiritual perspective as righteousness, that's what she begins to learn, so that she can become the spiritual creator that she already is, but she has to become aware of it. And you guys and others help her see that, understand that, not with the physical eyes, but with the eye, from the spiritual eye.
Yeah, I just want to add a little bit to that. Yeah, the spiritual side is already there, but she's coming into consciousness of something a little bit different, which is the smell, the taste, seeing people and interacting as a person in this realm. So she has to, even though the spiritual side of her is already there, she has to grow to a point where she can relearn that or re-understand it, if you will.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
No, absolutely, but it ties back to, again, the cosmic consciousness when we talk about the universe. And I think when Ron first started, he had mentioned in reference to Genesis, chapter 1, verses 1 through 3. And I think that, as we talk about the physical evolution, of moving into the Homo erectus through the Homo sapiens sapiens, where we begin to worship, in terms of Elohim, it talked about, before the beginning began and before existence existed, it says thought in the universal mind created desire in the heart. And desire spoke word in the heart, and the word became flesh. Because flesh brought all and everything into being and started the process of the cosmos becoming in the universe. And the Creator's first thought before the beginning began was. So I think that, again, in terms of just looking at it from the universe and looking at it from the beginning, I think that, again, I appreciate just having to ask the question, does this have any relationship, to Genesis 1 in terms of the birth of a conception of birth? Thank you for letting me just share my thoughts and then ask my question. And I appreciate the responses. I'm done.
I want to share something also. You mentioned at birth the intellect that the child is born with. I think the child is born with less intellect and more spiritual understanding, and that's why a child can play with friends that you don't see, and children make statements that, and you wonder where it came from. When they become dependent totally on intellect and lose their insight into spirituality, that's because of us. We take that away from them. And what we have purpose to do now, those of us who seek to understand, is to make sure that we don't rob our children of that spiritual nature that they're born with by telling them that invisible friend doesn't exist, or by saying to them what their statements they're making doesn't make sense. Rather than doing that, we ask questions, and then we find out that they're more informed than we thought they were. Does that make sense? Done.
Yes. And it's almost, George, it's almost like, when we have Australopithecus and then Homo erectus and then Neanderthal, it's almost as if each one is moving to a new place. So the old one has to kind of die out because each one is discovering. It's kind of like a child growing up, and it's kind of like a person who goes from discovering their intellect to discovering their spiritual side. So something has to die out along the way once you get to a new level, so to speak. So it's kind of like that. So your analogy works really well.
I do. That's where I was going with my thought. What if, like we talked about Abraham, God just not picking him out of a hat. Abraham invited that journey because he was curious as to who he was and what does that spirit that's pulling him look like. What does it supposed to? What is he doing with it? Same thing with Job. He does not pull God out of a hat. That is an invitation to see who I am. And what if the Cro-Magnon man and the Neanderthal represent that in man? It grows from the Nefesh being, meaning that he depends on survival. I go by my feelings and emotions. I want sex, I want food, I want pleasure, period. And he moves on till he starts to see that the more and not understanding it. And that being the darkness and confusion and even the formlessness and the void that he feels, and he moves from that to the Neanderthal, and then to the animalistic man that exists in the earth today, and until somebody reaches the point of being human. And maybe all of that is expressing man's spiritual journey, because for the most part, all we see is infancy and to adolescent to adulthood. But the spiritual part, maybe this is talking more about that journey, more than we know. So each and every form of that, to a higher place of awareness and a higher place of awareness, until we are seeking now to move that awareness into being totally spiritual beings, whereas we started off as being total animals. Does that make sense, or is that kind of tying in what you were saying?
Yes, yes, indeed. And the thing is, Ron, is, and this just came to me, if we don't move from here, we're going to die out too. We have to move
Yeah.
to a higher
Wow.
level.
And you're right, Audrey, and that is the reason when we understood what the Mayans said about humanity, we made a commitment not on our watch. And from that point to this point, what have we been doing? Everything we know, everything we've been shown, embracing who we are, and traveling this journey. And the journey that we travel is one to save humanity from itself. So I do not believe that we are going to be extinct in a few years, as it is predicted. If
But
we
Pat,
go ahead.
suppose the dying out is not a punishment but a reward.
I think, well, I'm talking about dying out physically.
Okay.
I don't think that we are going to die out physically as humanity did in previous periods, right?
Yes. Okay. Okay.
I do believe that the chaos that's being purposely created for the benefit of control and manipulation is what's dying out. And the death of it is seen with every new exposure of confusion. We know that the isms are confusion. When we look at what happened in Europe between Russia and Ukraine, that is a dying out. That mentality has to be dealt with. When we see what happened with the hurricane, my heart goes out to the people who are suffering. However, I do understand the nature of it. When you are in this position of authority and a hurricane destroys portions of New York and New Jersey, Hurricane Sandy, and you make every effort to keep aid from going to those places that needs it the most. You not only vote against it, but you make every effort to get a bill to deny that aid. And now you're the governor of Florida. And you have decried everything that those in power in Washington has done. And you have made every effort to be as mean and hateful and racist as possible by depriving people who need you the most basic necessities. And all of a sudden, the largest storm in the history of this country and one of the strongest crosses your state. And it starts where your greatest wealth is. And I'm not talking about spiritual wealth, where your financial wealth is, where your base is, where your focus is. It starts there and crisscross your state. And now, what's coming back to haunt you are your words that would discourage, tempted to stop aid from going to someone who needed it. Now, you have to kowtow to those who you made every effort to keep from sending money to you. So where are your friends now? Those friends who stood with you to stop the the aid from going to people who needed it. This is an example of change being right in our face. This is an example of our focus on bringing balance and on desiring righteousness to flow like the rivers of water and dominate this earth for the express purpose of removing that dark cloud for the people who have a mindset of evilness, a mindset of racism, can see the light. I hope that makes sense. I'm done.
It does make sense. Questions or comments, y'all? Can you see light and darkness here a little clearer?
It makes sense. Thank you, Ron. I have a question though. In our
Okay.
discussions about the creation of the Cro-Magnon man, the Neanderthals, etc., and then us, I'm wondering whether it was Ein Sof or Elohim who did the creation. And that may have been covered earlier and I missed it.
Pastor, you want to speak to that?
Repeat your question, Janice, please.
Sure. So I'm trying to understand who created the Neanderthals and who created us. Is it Ein Sof or Elohim?
If we look at the clarity of Elohim, Elohim is a creative force that was brought into existence in the beginning. It's like the beginning itself brought into existence the Elohim. It is my contention that Ein Sof, and for those who don't know, when we talk about Ein Sof. Ein Sof is that entity, that being that brought everything into existence, and it including the Elohim being the personality of it, the Yahweh being the personality of it. All of these things, entities that we reference as God, are the entities that are a representation of attributes of the light above all light, and that is referenced as Ein Sof, or the one who exists beyond all existence. So what Janice is asking is that the entity that brought these into existence. I do believe that they were brought into existence without the element that we are existing with, and that element being the existence of Elohim. I do believe that their existence was they came into existence a bit differently than we did. There is no record, as I know anyway. Maybe someone else does. Nick is an anthropologist; he may be able to help with that. How they came into existence, but there is a record, a continuous record, a record all over the world as to how the entities that we are came into existence. And that record says that we came into existence with the same attributes as the one who brought us, Elohim brought us into existence. So Ein Sof brought into existence in Elohim that brought us into existence in his likeness, in his character. I hope that at least partially answers the question, not totally, and I solicit help from anyone else who can probably say what I'm trying to say much clearer than I'm saying it. Thank you. Janice? does
That
help?
helps. Yeah, that helps. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess, and I have a tendency to oversimplify things, but I do it so it makes sense to me. But I see Elohim and Yahweh and all the other attributes as being that attributes, and no differently than you are a husband and a father and a pastor, and you become all these things that are in you, and they come out when the necessity comes for them to come out. For example, even if you had not fathered children, you become a father when a child needs fathering. So something that needed creating, the inventional or the creation of Elohim was necessary to do that. That aspect of Ensof to do that. So that's kind of how I see it. And I know that kind of, like I said, oversimplifies things.
Makes sense.
Anyone else questions or comments?
I think things do need to be simplified as much as possible. And what we have done today, I do believe, is see the creation for what it is, see light for what it is, and see us for who we are. And come to the conclusion that on this journey, we are constantly experiencing rebirth. And by that, I mean we are constantly being shown a portrait of who we are. And being shown that portrait of who we are, it is our desire to help everyone see that same portrait of who they are. And then we will see with a single eye. And when we begin to see with a single eye, that is when we are human. I'm done.
I enjoyed it, guys. I hope everybody got a thought. And as we always say, please write down any questions and or comments or places you like to begin a discussion on tomorrow. And we'd be happy to do so. Yes, sir.
Don't forget, I want everyone to remember today is the first Sunday. And we meet with California, okay?
Okay. That's at 3 p.m., correct?
Yeah, I sent the information to all of
You did. I just want to say it over the line, but yeah.
Okay. I'm done.
All right. Well, guys, I hope you have a good. Go ahead, Pastor.
The day has been great. That's all. Thank you, sir. I appreciate all of
Thank
your
you.
questions, comments.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome,
Thank you.
Mr. Osama.
Thank you.